What's up, everybody? You hanging in there and staying productive? Keeping your eyes on the prize? You running your inverted paradiddles and your patty fly-flies? Today's guest is the one and only Japes, Bouvet, who I've been fortunate enough to take a lesson with previously, and more recently have been delving into his Buddy Rich-inspired Flow Mode video course on his website, which is one of many courses you can delve into. So check it out if you're looking to expand your skill set on the kit. We definitely talk about said Buddy Rich Flow Mode course, as well as the new Triplet Rhythmic vocabulary course, and even a crazy Icelandic bike trek he embarked upon. So no shortage of goodness on this one, and always a pleasure to talk to JP, whose wisdom and analytic mind never cease to amaze me. Also, if you're interested in hearing more about JP's time and competing in the Guitar Center drum-offs, as well as the origins of him playing, studying, and a whole lot more, check out episode number 78, way back in the day, 3+ years ago, when I originally spoke to JP. Crash Bang Boom Podcast can be found on iTunes Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Luminary, Google Play, Podbean, and Amazon Music Podcasts. Feel free to check out any of the previous 200+ episodes or give me a like, a subscription, and or a positive review. Support is appreciated. Sponsor shout out to the one and only New Orleans Record Press. If you're looking to release some vinyl, hit them up at NewOrleansRecordPress.com to check out all the electroplating, mastering, design, packaging, vinyl coloring options, and more. And they even got some real-time quote generator there to keep tabs on all the goodness if that's what you're into. They also print 12 and 7-inch records in 150 and 180 gram variants and do small runs of 100 and larger runs up into the thousands. So hit them up, and that's NewOrleansRecordPress.com. Lastly, please do keep tabs on artists' live streams, lessons, and tutorials, as well as master classes from your favorite musicians, merch or physical releases that are for sale, as well as websites like SaveOurStages.com that are looking to help out in these trying times. So let's get up in it. JP Bouvet and the melodic chunks, blasting all the improvisational rainbow-colored chunks right into your ear holes. Crash, bang, boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
Yeah! JP Bouvet, what's happening, man? How are you doing, buddy?
I am doing real good. It's really good to be back.
Yeah, man. It's I didn't realize that I rarely do when visiting a guest for the second time around, how long ago it was, but apparently that was like over 3 years ago the last time we spoke.
Damn. Makes you it's a little depressing, but yes.
Time's flying by, man. Although I feel like since March of 2020, it's been creeping by at times, but I guess that's as long as you're feeling productive enough to try to take advantage of that. You can get some stuff done and do some cool shit, of which I think you've been doing, so we'll certainly get to talk about that, which is cool.
Oh man, brother, hell yeah! I don't think anyone's savoring trying to draw out the last year, 2020.
I know, right? Oh my God, man. It's hard also to sort of reminisce about sort of what was going on at that time and place 3 years ago. My first son was on the way. I've had another one. I've since relocated to Salt Lake City, Utah, which is completely crazy.
Damn, talk about serious life changes.
I know, seriously. But I was thinking about the night that I actually, the first time that I met you, I actually took a drum lesson with you, which was really cool. And then later on, we hooked up for the interview and talk about a different time and place. We did that in person.
That's right.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
That alone is indicative of a different time and place. And I remember that night in particular being an especially treacherous, snowy, icy shitstorm that I was walking through in Queens with all my gear to interview you. And I remember thinking, if I sprain my ankle and have to crawl to this interview, he's going to have to help me get back out on the ice to take a cab back to Brooklyn from here. Thankfully, that didn't happen, though, so...
Hell yeah. Well, I had forgotten the details about that. That's right. Hell yeah. That's actually one of the only in-person interviews I've done. I'm glad in the age of Zoom you're not doing video, because I'm an aggressive pacer when I think and talk.
Uh-huh.
And I've found video interviews are just really a buzzkill.
Yeah, it's hard to time everything. It can get pretty confusing at times. But I tell you what, you did have some things to say, because to this day that was the longest interview that I've done, and now over 200 interviews. So congrats, JP. You talked your ass off the entire time.
Yeah, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'll take it.
Oh man. Well, I've been enjoying the couple of courses that you have. I haven't gotten into the Triplet Rhythmic vocabulary one, but we'll certainly talk about it. I think I'm on the 8th of 14 for the Buddy Rich flow mode, which has been really cool as someone who's been sort of fascinated with Buddy and perplexed at times by some of the stuff he did. I was curious to get into it and have you do the work to decode some of that stuff. So we'll certainly talk about it. But in going back to the last time we met, I did want to ask you, you were about to go on a pretty extensive bike ride in Iceland, I believe. Is that what happened, and how did that go?
Yeah. It's funny. That really feels like so long ago, which really dates our conversation. But that was an epic and important trip for me. I mean, yeah, me and two friends, we embarked on the goal of circling Iceland on their ring road, which is about 700 miles.
Oh my God.
And it was with one friend. One friend kind of threw out an open invite online. He was like, hey, if anyone wants to join, me and my wife are going to do, we're planning on doing the ring road, which is like, as far as bike touring goes, and we're talking about like bicycles, not motorized for those of you who are faster minded than we are. But, so he throws that out there, and he's done some touring, and a bunch of people were like, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea, count me in. And I threw my hat, and I was like, in my heart, I was like, oh, this is happening for sure. Yeah. And of course, by the time it actually, push came to shove, everyone else had dropped out, and it was just me and Jeff and Louise. And I mean, it's hard to summarize because it was really full of it was almost a nonstop, awe-inspiring experience. Also, like one of the most difficult things I've done. But
yeah,
the scenery, basically at every moment being outside, is breathtaking. It's just sort of one unbelievable landscape after another, and the island's famous for its variety of landscapes. So you'll be in a very Martian feeling flat rocky landscape of black with thick squishy spongy green moss over everything in sight. And then you sort of could turn a corner, which on a bicycle turning that corner takes about 3 hours, but you metaphorically turn a corner, and then you're looking at just glaciers meeting mountains. Waterfalls are kind of everywhere. There's very famous waterfalls there. It's really hard to put words to, because it's there is, of course, an abundance of nuance and subtlety that is amazing, but it is in its grandest scope, the most amazing. And I feel like that's actually some of the hardest stuff to describe, because you end up saying a bunch of cliche stuff. And it was awe-inspiring. It was totally it rooted you in the moment of just, awe at what was going on. So yeah, it was an absolute blast. And it took us 3 weeks.
Wow.
Iceland is not, we're there in the middle of summer, which means that the sun never sets.
Oh.
But summer doesn't necessarily mean warm there. So, wind, it's notoriously windy, rainy, and cold, which is why that route is notoriously difficult to do.
Wow.
Mind you, I had never bike toured before, so this was a very ambitious. It reflects either my confidence or my stupidity that it would be okay. But I got situated with a good bike. I got a great deal. I happened to just find on Craigslist an ad that said, "Want to tour the world on a Surly long haul trucker," which is the name of the bike. And I found this guy in Manhattan who had been sadly destroyed by some marriage falling apart, and his friend was just selling all his stuff, and he had all the gear I would have bought.
No way.
All together, and somehow at a I don't know, 60% of the price I would have paid for it. He just wanted to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It was actually pretty incredible. But anyways, we're out there. It was an amazing time. The one book I brought is A Small Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And that is a really profound, and at least for me, it affected me very deeply kind of book, especially at that point in my life. But that, plus the scenery, plus this very, being with two people that I really love and respect, and the physical challenge of it, conquering these mountains through the wind and rain, and actually being sort of at certain points afraid for your safety, very legitimately.
Yeah. Yeah.
All combined, life-changing for several reasons. I also ended up proposing to my wife at the end of that when she came to Reykjavik to join for the week at the end of it.
Oh, nice. Congrats.
Thank you. And that's actually when I, in my mind, made I passed the tipping point of deciding I wanted to go back to school to study something.
Right.
I wanted to do something, add something to my life.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, long story longer, it was a very pivotal trip for me. Now, a year later, we did another 3 weeks in the mountains in Idaho.
Wow.
And actually, I just talked to them, literally, coincidentally, yesterday.
Wow.
About doing a much flatter trip, much easier trip.
Yeah.
In France this coming August, which we hope we can bring to fruition despite the unknown COVID situation.
Right. That's wild, man. I love it that you went to Idaho. As mentioned, now that I'm in Utah, Idaho is directly north, and there's no shortage of mountain biking and all kinds of in between Utah, Idaho, Wyoming's right there. So that's one of the perks, I think, of being out here is that I can take a weekend trip and go see some pretty crazy landscapes myself and get into some pretty awesome biking and hopefully not land in the hospital like I did when I was in Peru, thinking that I was ruling the world and kicking ass way up in the Andes Mountains that landed me in the hospital. So that can happen too.
Yikes. Yeah, well, at least you're a little closer to home if you do kick your own ass while you're out there, you know?
Yeah, man. I like it that you said that the sort of scared for your life aspect and being out in nature and everything that it offers and all of that, all of its elements. Because as growing up in Southeast Louisiana, my parents had camps down out in Manchac, Louisiana, which is out just way out in the swamps. And I remember thinking, if like your boat breaks down, the mosquitoes would half eat you to death. There's just that. And if you like decide to swim back, the alligators could potentially eat you. So it's just the constant reminder of man's fragility in the face of how harsh nature can be is a humbling experience that I think many people, especially in cities and whatnot, deviate so far from that it seems like it's another world. And I think the humility that ensues is an important life lesson. And it sounds like you got it. So I get it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like, pushing up against those things there is something really important about it. It informs something deep down about your humanity, maybe your shared humanity, maybe your part in nature, maybe your fragility, like you said.
Yeah.
There's like so much good mining to do, in that specific cave.
Absolutely, man. Well, getting back to what we mentioned a little bit about some of these courses that you've been doing. Like I said, I'm up to, I believe, 8 out of 14 of it. But tell me a little bit about in regards to the Buddy Rich flow mode, and then we can talk about the triplet vocabulary. Tell the listeners a little bit about, I guess delving into Buddy Rich, sort of assessing what it is that was maybe mystical and or misunderstood, or just people had a general interest about, and sort of developing a course out of that. Because I would imagine, having now gone through it, I kept thinking to myself, I think JP spent some time trying to map this out.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it appears so. A long time ago, I stopped doing courses that referenced other drummers and broke down their stuff or you know what I mean? Just because I set a pretty high bar in general for being an expert on something, and I definitely don't consider myself an expert on really any other drummer's drumming.
Right.
Because it just requires a level of study. And that's why I was careful to name, and perhaps this gets totally lost on people, but it made me comfortable with it. Perhaps that's why I named it the Buddy Rich Inspired Flow Mode course.
Right.
Because there is a limit to, I still, I cannot drum like Buddy Rich. I don't plan on ever being able to. But for me, the course represents how I learn and take inspiration from drummers, right? And it is very much so my form of learning, and some people will really associate with it, some people won't. But I've always been one to extract the vibe, right? The general sound, the aesthetic of the drumming, and try to imitate it with my own tools. So requiring zero understanding of specific patterns, none of that stuff. And then if I go further than that in a methodical way, it's usually picking out, as far as specific stickings go and stuff, 1 or 2, 3 or 4 specific things, but not entire measure fills, right? I'm looking at within this fill, what elements of it make it sound like it sounds? What is important that I can extract and learn to play with myself? Because if I can do that, then I will be extracting the type of sound I want, but I will sort of automatically be forced to make it my own because I'm not taking the time to copy it exactly.
Right.
Now, there are pros and cons to this approach. And now that I'm older, I'm like especially aware of like the shortcomings of this and the strengths of this. But for a person like me that learns the way I learn with my specific goals, this is the way that I like to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've never learned an exact transcription.
Right.
No teacher has ever asked me to, and thank God, because if they did, I would have done it begrudgingly, right? And I think a lot of people share that. What they get out of the transcription is not equal payoff to the amount of time they put in,
Right.
Because again, what you really might need from that specific, 32-bar drum solo, what might be most useful to you in that moment might just be one or two of the patterns, and then gaining mastery with those specific patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be the vocabulary that you need to take on, that you would get the most leverage out of at that point in your drumming.
Right.
It might not be, because you're never going to just turn on a transcribed solo
Mm-hmm.
and, in the middle of your own playing. But anyways,
Yeah.
long story longer, that was kind of the approach with the Buddy Rich thing. It's like, what are the most accessible, most useful patterns that either, well, yes, that he's doing, but also that we can use to imitate Buddy's general aesthetic, right, general style,
Mm-hmm.
and use these, install this vocabulary in our own vocabulary to be creative with. That's really the goal that I'm always trying to achieve with students.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, look, we're trying to expand your vocabulary
Mm-hmm.
or build an entire new subset of vocabulary, which you can mix around and be creative with. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
So that was the idea with Buddy. And it actually started because I was asked to sort of guinea pig this other learning program from a friend, how to learn better, how to teach yourself better, regardless of what you're doing, but in this case, the drums.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to choose something that I really wanted to get better at and that I thought would be really hard for me.
Yeah.
So I'm not a particularly fast drummer,
Mm-hmm.
and I am as fast as I should be given how little time I've spent working on speed deliberately.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I've always kind of really been fascinated by like how fast Buddy plays, and I don't really know what he's doing.
Right.
So that's where it came from. And in the program started with analyzing, like picking 4 clips that seemed like sort of impossibly hard, but also like very attractive to you,
Mm-hmm.
and breaking that, transcribing those or finding transcriptions. And these are like, 4 measures long. The longest one I think was 8 measures long, and just looking at what patterns are in there, right? And so for me, what the whole course is built around, and actually, since these are audio clips that I was analyzing, I don't actually know what his stickings are, right? So I'm sort of, playing drums long enough that you start to get a sense of like what he was probably doing and what would be like a very efficient way to do it.
Uh-huh.
But I don't actually know. People have really deeply ingrained different sets of patterns and habits.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no way of verifying that Buddy is playing them the way I played them. But
Yeah.
I figured out that with a relatively small set of patterns, you could do a lot of the things that Buddy was doing in
Right.
these specific clips.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the specific patterns that became sort of the subset of vocabulary in the Buddy Rich course. And there's actually really just there's the 3, there's the 6 to 9, the TDD3.
I'll say from like what your breakdown, I realized that what I was missing in sort of assessing what was going on was that I wasn't thinking in triplets and or 6s, 9s, etc., which is something that is an ongoing theme throughout it.
Right.
And I realized, and then once I started playing it, I was like, oh wow, if I can get these stickings and sort of these concepts even, and sort of hear them melodically as you talk about, to then be able to incrementally speed that up, I could get to a place where I could start voicing that at higher BPMs, and I think sort of approximate some of that of what he was doing. At least that's my perspective.
Nice. Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah. And there's really only 4 or 5 main pieces of vocabulary in the whole course.
Right.
And it's actually interesting to think about why this course is such a compact and useful course.
Mm-hmm.
Like at this moment, as you said, like the course that's currently going on my site is the Triplet Rhythmic vocabulary course.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to be much longer. It's going to be much harder. There's going to be infinitely more possibilities than there are in the Buddy Ridge course. And it's interesting to actually think about why, right? And this is why, part of why the Buddy Ridge course is like a really fun, great place that I feel very confident like pointing any student to.
Uh-huh.
If you can play these rudiments, you can get a lot out of this course, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, like I said, there's only really 4 or 5 pieces of vocab,
Mm-hmm.
and that basically covers, like, there's like 1 or 2 caveats by the end of the course. It basically allows you to play like any swung 8th note rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And therein lies the key to why it is so simple and fun, and you maximize the potential of it really by the end of it, because all you're allowed to do melodically, you're stuck to the 8th note swung grid,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're stuck to ba ba da 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 da
Yep.
da da ba da. That's your whole grid. So you're not dealing with all the notes. Like
Mm-hmm.
You're not dealing with the second triplet.
Right.
And in straight time, you're not dealing with 16 notes. Because you can imagine in straight time, if you were asked to improvise on the 8th note grid, there would be very little interesting stuff to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're like ba 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 da da ga da 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 da, right? That's like you get tiring fast, and anyone could get pretty proficient at doing that fast.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's like super self-contained. It's like this small subset of vocabulary, because
Mm-hmm.
there's actually a limit to the amount of melodic content that you can do with it at that speed, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like a weird inverse correlation. It's like the faster you go, the less melodic options you have in the
Mm-hmm.
details.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I'm at like a slow triplet,
Mm-hmm.
I can play the second triplet. I can do a lot of stuff in there. But if we're going da 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 da,
Yeah.
you're kind of just stuck to like ba ba da 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 da. You know what I mean? Like, that's as fast as you can go. So,
Right.
anyways, I was reflecting on that the other day, because that course is it really is a blast to do, and I've seen students get a ton out of it very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably a welcome respite for my students, because I tend to do these long, complex, courses with like major implications that are like very important for your playing, but like also require like a bit of studying and like less payoff. This one's like all payoff.
Right. Oh man. It absolutely does make sense, and I like that you introduce sort of this representational. I guess I don't know if you call it representational vocabulary or representational thinking or whatever,
Yeah.
but to be able to establish, like 3 or so patterns and say, associate this melody with what this is visually, and then be able to mix that around. It makes it that much easier to improvise, because in your mind you're just shifting it. So for me, that made total sense, and I don't know that I've really done much, and I'm going on 30 years of drumming in regards to something that was kind of simplified that way visually, and that could then also conversely be done improvisationally and have it work out like that. I was actually surprised that, again, to your point, I think the payoff was quicker and sooner than I imagined in that regard.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's like the concept of chunking, if you've heard of it. And a lot of people speak about it in a way that I think oversimplifies its potential. But like the idea with chunking is like, that's why we learn rudiments, right? So in your first day of drums, when you learn a paradiddle, you have to think about each individual note. You have to go, okay, right, and then left, and then what's next? Oh, right, and then right.
Mm-hmm.
And then after you've done that for 1,000 times,
Yeah.
you just merely think the thought paradiddle, and your hands do the thing, right? It is one individual piece of information now, but in that chunk of information is an entire sticking, and is in some cases an entire rhythmic melody, or like whatever it might be, coordination. There's all this stuff built into the chunk. And as people gain mastery at anything, the chunks contain, you can't remember like more chunks, but the chunks contain more information,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they have more to draw from in your memory, right? You've loaded all of this stuff in your procedural memory, and you can pull out larger chunks of it. You can start thinking of rearranging those chunks, or you can start thinking of merely melodies that you know you're familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
and the chunks will fill themselves in.
Yeah.
And for a course like that, and for much of my teaching, I'm trying to always reverse engineer what it feels like to improvise.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I'm thinking like, well, what's going on in my mind? Right? I'm thinking of melodies. Well, how do we get melodies? Well, we need to upload them in chunks, and the most useful melodic chunks.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we need. And there's like an interesting end point, like when you speak, for example, like you're referring to chunks of like linguistic information, but you're also not really thinking about rearranging chunks.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, like when you learn to improvise, first you upload the chunks, and then you use the chunks, like when you export them onto the drum set. So you begin thinking in chunks and rearranging them, and that gives you coordination, that gives you new emergent melodies. But there's a certain point where you're not actually even thinking in chunks on the way out. You're thinking just melodies and shape and structure in a larger degree and phrasing,
Mm-hmm.
and the chunks of information are just there, like faithfully executing your vision. You know what I mean?
Right. Totally. Yeah. Ideally, I think at that point you are in what is ultimately, I guess, the flow mode. Which is what you're trying to get to.
Exactly.
And I don't know if you noticed, and especially for the listeners, if y'all heard me laughing during one of those explanations. In addition, for JP setting the record for the longest podcast episode, definitely no one has said the word chunk more frequently over the course of a conversation. And you said it so. I just started laughing. I was trying to contain my laughter. For some reason, I was just like a 5-year-old laughing at the word chunk being mentioned over and over again. It's just fucking hilarious to me.
Yeah, I know, right? Especially, I need to work on my terminology. Inward chunks and outward chunks. I don't know.
I think at some point you said chunk melody, and I thought that's the one that really got me.
Yeah, you can name the episode that.
Chunk melody. Oh, damn it. That's so good. Oh, God.
Do you improvise much on your own? Do you sit at the kit and just fuck around?
I do, and I have, and I've been hitting a wall about it, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot as of late, because, again, after 30 years, I'm just wondering why I can't just sit down and sort of not feel as though I'm confined to something. I think part of it is that I'm still kind of in a cerebral rudiment kind of mind. I'm the chunks that I'm going through. I may be thinking a little bit of melody, but I think ultimately I'm still tied to rudiments. And I think that has been one of the bigger challenges. And it's something that I've in speaking to a lot of drummers, it's part of in getting to the flow mode in which you referenced. That's something that is one of the hurdles to get to that point. You kind of have to get out of a cerebral rudiment-based place, to my understanding, and get to where that work has been done. As you said, you're hearing and seeing whatever it is, shapes, colors, phrases, and you can just play and get in it and be there and do it. But getting to that place for me has been the challenge.
Yeah. Not that you asked, but that's a part of the process that I find particularly interesting, and that is, as I'm sure you've picked up on, like that is, well, something I try to reiterate often in the rhythmic vocabulary stuff is that each rudiment because the problem you just described, I think, is very common. Right? We put a ton of focus on rudiments. We've got all these patterns that we can execute very quickly on a pad. And then we sit at the drum set, and none of it seems to really apply anymore. Mm-hmm. Or we can move between rudiments, but it sounds like we're moving between rudiments.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
The rudiments are identifiable still on the drum set, which you don't really want.
Right.
You don't listen to your favorite drummer play and think like, oh, wow, those are some nice paradiddle diddles that you just played. Right? It's just you hear music, and it happens to be made of rudiments and other things. So my whole rhythmic vocabulary thing is that people are spending too much time thinking about only the stickings of rudiments and zero time extracting the melodies that are built into every rudiment. Right. So like classic example is the paradiddle, right? The paradiddle itself, right, left, right, left, right, left, left. That, a lot of people struggle to apply that on the drum set. But if you think about what the right hand melody is, right? Ba, 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 right, left, right, left, right, left. that is extremely useful and you use all the time. And the thing is, once you extract the melody, it no longer has to be confined to the sticking, right? So the sticking is one way to create the melody. You can put your right hand on the tom, put your left hand on ghost notes, and you go boom, 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 and that's great. But you now, and I'm not really telling this to you. I mean, you might. I'm telling this to. I'm drawing out the theory is that if where you extract that melody, and then you can say, okay, I'm going to apply it to the kick drum. Boom, 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 boom. Or you can put it on the right hand while on the bell while you're kick and snare play like 4 on the floor, right? So you're going ding, 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 boom. And so the melody becomes a part of you. The sticking is built into the chunk associated with that melody. And then you also have to develop, that chunk of information also has to develop like the independence and coordination, for example, to put it on the kick drum underneath the groove.
Right.
Or something like that, right? So like every rudiment has melodies built in. Now, I think some of them are more useful than others. That's why I have the thing called the Big 10 or the Big 8 for triplets. But that's exactly, I mean, you like couldn't have teed that up better.
Yeah.
Because, if some parent came to me and they're like, my 2-year-old, they are going to play drums and they will do whatever you say for the next 2 decades, right? I would, and it was like their whole, I knew they would do all the work I wanted, and they were just going to like be my little curriculum prototype child. I would, from the beginning, as soon as they started playing rudiments, I would be emphasizing the melodic content of every rudiment that they played while they went, and they have to be able to sing it, and they have to be able to play it, bring out the right hand melody, left hand melody. Because once all that melodic content is in your head, then you can imagine if you can rearrange the melodic content in your head, you can like improvise, just going ba da 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 ba da da. You can do that and it be interesting. Then translating it to the drum set's a fairly easy next step, right? The problem a lot more people have is that they've got all this coordination and technique and rudiments, and they can play fast, but there's no interesting melodic content in their library.
Yeah.
So you could play, the fastest rudiments around the drum set ever, but it's not going to make it unique or interesting. It's just going to be fast and boring.
Right.
So, interesting drumming really comes from many things, but one of them that I'm convinced is the most commonly missing is that ability to create simply unique melodies at the core before you even think about how you're going to creatively beam them down to the drum set.
Yeah, right. Wow. That was good, man. There was one question I was going to ask you. You had mentioned mostly listening to like audio of Buddy Rich. And for me, it's something that I've mentioned previously on some of the other episodes, and sort of listening to him and getting a sense of some of what he was doing. I always really liked, of the battles that he's done, and of which there were many, in particular, there's a recording of he and Gene Krupa doing it. And what was interesting about him sort of keying off of what Gene was doing is Gene's vocabulary and execution, I would say, was like a little more straightforward. Great swing feel. I would argue that that Gene swung more than Buddy. But as far as the execution of it, you could pretty easily, or I could pretty easily understand what he was doing. And then to hear Buddy sort of quote a little bit of that at the beginning, it was an interesting starting point for him to then evolve where he was going. So to have a starting point that he referenced that was Gene Krupa in a sense, and then develop it, I could hear a little bit more of what Buddy was doing because of that, because I had a sense of where he started,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Were there any particular songs or any of that stuff that I guess that you kind of keyed in on that you thought were particularly interesting or a good prototype for sort of listening to what he was doing?
Yeah, there's an album called Buddy Rich in Miami, and the song Lover Come Back to Me has a bunch of crazy trading on it with some, it's really clear. It's obviously really fast and interesting, but it's also really clear to hear. So I took 3 examples from that. And there's one from some really long, I think it's the famous West Side Story solo.
Okay.
There's like a section of that I took, which is in 6/8, which I found some transcription of. Fortunately for that one, I didn't have to do the work myself. But yeah, those were a couple pretty useful recordings.
Nice, man. In listening to those recordings, I don't know if you've listened to any other jazz guys at the times, but that sort of high tuning that was indicative of those players is especially interesting with Buddy because he played big drums, but he tuned them high. Similar to, honestly, I mean, John Bonham did the same thing. He was playing big drums and tuned everything pretty high. Not as high, but pretty damn high, relative to most rock drummers, I would say. But then I noticed on your jazz kit, you were even starting to tune a little bit higher, it seemed. Was delving into that stuff and hearing those voicings, has that affected your sense of how you tune your own kit?
Oh yeah, 100%. I happen to be, I mean, the tuning of your kit really affects what you play.
Yes.
I'm the millionth person to point that out, but it continues to be a useful lever to pull when you want to intentionally affect your playing or direct your practicing.
Mm-hmm.
Like at this moment, we just recorded drums for Childish Japes album, and
mm-hmm.
that's like beats,
mm-hmm.
hip hop, soul, kind of like all sorts of beats.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like a beats kit set up, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of punchy, short. I'm trying to sort of imitate like a clap snare and a short kick drum.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that was over, I mean, for sort of no reason, I'm like deep in a jazz hole right now.
Okay.
And so luckily, I mean, this jazz kit sounds, the one that I typically use, the DW Jazz Collectors, that one, it just, obviously it sounds great, tuned up, cranked up. And the change in your playing is huge. So yeah, when I was doing the Buddy stuff, yes, I had things cranked up pretty good. Not like high bop kind of stuff, but
right.
like, higher than I usually do. So that, everything's got tone, everything's got sustain, and it's got length to the notes. And you realize like a lot of your stuff doesn't necessarily work, right? If you've got like an open kick drum, like
mm-hmm.
I do right now in my space, like doing a lot of stuff between like linear stuff with a bunch of quick kicks, you have to pay more attention to where you put the kick drums. It's not that it can't work,
mm-hmm.
but some stuff just doesn't sound as good, right? And
right.
it's like, when your floor tom's tuned really low and punchy, like your kick drum, your kick and your floor tom sort of play like twin roll, where it's like you can be moving between them, and it blends really nicely. But if you crank that floor tom up, so it's like it's a note, it's got a lot of tone and a lot of ring, it doesn't blend so well with a kick drum that's not, up there too.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to shift your focus, and you're looking at like, okay, I got to create these melodies with my hands. And sometimes, you realize like, oh, I lean on my kick drum as a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's certain patterns that have kick drums in it that I use all the time. You might not even realize it until they don't sound good and you can't use them anymore. And then this focus shifts to your hand. And that's kind of where I am right now. I've got things cranked up pretty good. I mean, I'm just in jazz mode right now for really no reason except that I'm rarely here. And so when I am here, I'm like really trying to milk it for all it's worth.
I hear you. Yeah, man. And I know you touched briefly on the Triplet Rhythmic vocabulary videos and stuff, but when I saw that you were doing that, having at the time and still been within the Buddy Rich flow mode, I was like, well, that makes perfect sense, the Triplet Rhythmic vocabulary, because of how steeped in triplets the Buddy Rich stuff was. So did you plan on doing the Triplet Rhythmic vocabulary beyond the Buddy Rich stuff, or were you led to the triplet vocabulary from the Buddy Rich stuff?
It was a bit more of a coincidence, actually. Yeah, I'm glad that what I'm doing is appearing very intentional.
Yeah.
but no, the triplet version of, because I did the regular straight time rhythmic vocabulary. That's like sort of the most fundamental core curriculum thing on my website, because it sort of informs everything else. But then, so for a long time, right, since I did that like a year and some ago, I've sort of in the back of my mind been like, okay, well, the triplet one has to happen at some point because it's different. And people, some students would reach out and be like, so like, what's the triplet version of this? Mm-hmm. And it's totally different. That's what's really like potentially frustrating, is that the patterns and melodies don't really transfer. Mm-hmm. And of course you can do them all, but it's that, again, I'm trying to highlight the ones that are the most useful, not necessarily just possible.
Right.
So there's very different, starting places.
Okay.
You're talking about straight time and triplet. So
yeah.
So no, I mean, I really just try to alternate on my site between courses. Essentially, there's always a course unfolding. So I try to alternate between things that, really ask a lot of the student, things that have less inherent payoff, and they're more long-term, like usually more important things like rhythmic vocabulary.
Yeah.
I alternate between those and things that are, more fun, have more payoff. I'll try to alternate between grooves, focus stuff, and, fill or solo focus stuff, so that, because not everyone's following the weekly course. Some people have their own agenda,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just doing their thing. So, I can't obviously be pleasing everyone at the same time. So
Yeah.
I try to vary it up so that, in case someone's getting stuck on something, or they're getting to the end of something, or they're like, damn, I really want to just work on something new. Bam, new course starts, totally different from the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And it maybe, it's exactly the kind of thing that you were looking for.
Right. And that's cool. It's worth mentioning that on your site, and that you do both the monthly subscription as well as individual purchase for videos. So anyone that's interested should definitely check out the site. And by the way, how fortunate is it that leading up to the time in which we find ourselves, you had been developing this? I was thinking about you and Stanton Moore both, because he has his Stanton Moore Drum Academy website and has all kinds of similar courses, videos, etc. Man, I think you're fortunate to have developed this leading up to this time and have sort of a body of work, and have something that in studying your own stuff you could then apply towards courses that ultimately go back to your website. I think that's quite a fortunate call that you inadvertently made some years ago.
Agreed. Yeah, I couldn't be more fortunate. I've been able to keep doing half of my career during that,
Yeah.
time, that half.
Yeah. You had mentioned sort of verbatim playing with Buddy Rich. I don't know if you've seen him or not. Have you watched the kid Grayson Neckrutman? I could be Neckrutman. I could be mispronouncing his last name. On Instagram, he plays verbatim drum solos for Buddy and Art Blakey and all these jazz greats and everything, like next to them, like video side by side. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't. You have to send me his name or a link after.
Oh, dude, you got to see it. Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, it's insane that if from as far as I can tell, he's playing verbatim solos. I will definitely send it to you. It's some wild shit, man.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Well, for 2021, I know there's a lot of shit that is unsure as to how it'll pan out and when it'll pan out and all of the specifics involved. But is there a release, a tentative release date for what you've been working on with Childish Japes?
No, but as soon as possible. This is the first album we've had to do remote, so we're passing files around, doing drums and then bass and then guitar and then vocals.
Right.
Just because it is what it is.
Yeah.
But it's actually working out great. And this is the album to do it, because there's very little improv. It's very focused on the songwriting, and like I said, it's a bunch of beats. So yeah, I don't know. Later this year.
Nice.
It's going to be really good, I can tell you that.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, and one thing I didn't ask you, did you have any touring plans with Generation Axe that got canceled or anything that happened in 2020?
Yeah, they were looking at spring this year, actually. So right around now, we'd be probably gearing up to do the talk was Europe. I mean, it's kind of always shifting, and I'm not really in on the planning, but that was the last I heard. But that was long ago, and it has long since been canceled. So
right.
No updates on that front. Yeah, no updates on any touring front, except I just got asked to do my first single show, not even really a show, but show that I think I've played in maybe a year or eight months or something. It's just my friend Joanna Teeters, who's an awesome singer, asked me to play a little video shoot with her, and I was like, wow, this is novel.
Yeah, what a concept. My God, man.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, JP. Well, man, thanks for hanging, man. Always a good time talking to you and picking your brain and your insights into the philosophical and beyond with drumming and life and all of that. So always cool to talk to you. So I appreciate the time, my man.
It's been a pleasure, Jody. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks, JP, for rapping. Always a good time talking to him and getting a sense of just how it is that he does what he does. Hope y'all enjoyed it as well. We'll catch you on the next one. Crash, bang, boom.